Hey dudes, what's up? It's Kaiser Nail again. I just got back from the Mesquite Regional in Texas, the BT15 format, and I ended up taking a top 32 spot. Specifically, I got 17th place, barely bubbled out of top 16. I had 5 wins, 1 loss, and then 1 draw at the end. We'll talk about my matchups later on in the video, but first let's get the quick deck list out of the way. Alright, first up we have our eggs. We're running 3 of the BT15 Tsunomon and then 1 of the BT14 Bukamon. Pretty self-explanatory. If I could run more of the Bukamon I would, but since we can't, we're running 3 of this and 1 of this. Then we've got our rookies. We're running 4 of the BT15 Gabumon, and this card is great. It helped me a lot during the tournament. The start of main phase effect came up a lot. Giving a stack blocker was pretty cool. It meant that a lot of little things like Numamon or Flame Mons couldn't swing freely without being blocked sometimes, and the start of main draw one if you have a mat came up pretty frequently. Great card, fantastic. Then we've got the BT1 Gabumon, the one that draws 1 card on play. This card was great. It helped proc my mats, and sometimes the BT5 Gabumon actually whiffs on the search, so this guy was really helpful to draw 1 card and then proc the mat guaranteed, no ifs, ands, or buts. Then we're running 2 of the BT5 Searcher Gabu. This guy's pretty good. He can dig you 3 deep in your deck, picking up a Garurumon or an Omnimon, and we have 2 Omnimons in this deck and a bunch of Garurumon, so he came in pretty clutch. Then we've got 3 copies of the BT9 Gabumon X. Pretty self-explanatory why we're running this guy. Great hard drop for 3 if you need to search for something to pass turn. Turn 1, Evo in the back, go into a Gabumon in the back. Maybe if you've got more than one of these guys in your hand, you just drop 1, pass them to 3, search your deck. Pretty good. And of course we're running 1 of the EX5 limited Gabumon X Antibody. This card is so busted. He came up so many times and helped me out a ton during the tournament. Specifically the dig for 4 and then add 2 back. That is nuts. The fact that you get to dig 4 and add 2 is crazy. Alright, up next we've got our champions, our level 4s, and we're running 4 of the BT15 Garurumon. This guy, I thought he was not good at first, like when the set first came out, but after playing with it more and more, I wanted to see this guy all the time. The fact that you can Digivolve and then play out a mat for a reduced cost of 3 if you don't already have a mat, huge. That's so important. We need our mats out all the time, and we need them out early. The earlier we can see mat, the more benefit we gain by going up our line while we're in the battle area. Yeah, the Inherit is only a once per turn when attacking draw 1, but this deck draws so much already, I honestly didn't mind drawing once per turn off of the champion as opposed to the promo Garurumon. Sometimes I've even gotten really close to like decking myself out just because of the sheer amount of draw that this deck does. So this doesn't really hurt. It actually felt fine. And of course, not to mention the fact that you get to draw 1 if you have a mat already in play when you Evo. Like, that's great. That already triggers your mats, and we need to trigger our mats all the time. And we're also running 2 of the promo Garurumon. This card is great. You already know what it does. You can win attack, draw 1, and that's not once per turn, so you can draw as many times as you can restand and swing. Then we're running 3 of the BT9 Garurumon X. This card is great, just more battle protection, a free draw, and a free Evo on top of any of your Garurumons that aren't X Antibody. Just a great card. And then finally wrapping up our level 4s, we have 1 of the Garurumon X Antibody from EX5. This card is insane. Anytime I went into this card when I was Digivolving into the battle area, I felt like I was just getting 1 over on my opponent. The fact that you get to draw 2, trash 2, and then gain a memory most of the time is absolutely crazy. And not to mention it's another layer of that battle protection that doesn't need to remove sources. You can just put your trash back into your deck. Fantastic. Alright, now we've got our ultimates. Starting out, we've got our promo 1 of Were Garurumon. This guy's the sauce man. Anytime you can get it to this guy, you just start swinging, go crazy. So good. Another 1 of in the deck is the EX1 Were Garurumon. This guy is kind of slept on, I feel like. He doesn't do a whole lot when you Digivolve except for draw a card, so you're drawing 2 cards when you Evo into this guy, and that draw effect does trigger your mats, which can make or break whether or not you can keep popping off for that turn, going into a Were-X, or even just a level 6 right after this guy. You don't even need to go into a Were-X after this guy. And his Inherit is actually really good. It's when attacking, once per turn, if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, you get to gain a memory. And that's pretty good, you know, like, that can make or break the difference between, oh, will I have enough memory to go into a Melga, or if I swing with Melga, will I have enough memory to go into a Melga X and then keep turn and keep swinging? Like, really good card. And another one of, we have the WereGarurumon Ace from BT15. This card actually won me a couple of games in the tournament. The fact that you can just drop this for 4 and stun a body, make it not be able to turn sideways until the end of their turn, it's actually pretty huge. I didn't like Evoing into this guy, like, I didn't like having him in my stack because I don't like giving my opponent a ton of memory if they remove my stack, which they were doing constantly, because that's just how you beat this deck. You kill the stack with Heaven's Judgment, or you bottom deck it, or top, you know, send it back to your hand or something like that. Anything like that, they put it in security off like a long key or something. It kills the deck. It's so bad. So I did not like having this guy in the stack. It was very bad. I liked to keep him in my hand in case I needed to hard drop him for 4, or in case I needed to blast Evo and save my bacon for a turn. Then we've got 2 of the WereGarurumon Sagittarius mode promo. This guy came up so many times in the tournament. The fact that we, almost every single time I Evo'd into this guy, had a Tamer made his effect live. So when Digivolving, you bounce 2 level 3s to your opponent's hand, and you know what's running around right now. It's a lot of Red Hybrid, it's a lot of Numamon. People are playing Ukomons all day. This guy handles those threats quickly and efficiently as soon as you have a Tamer out. And we have Tamers out pretty early and pretty often in this deck, so it's a no-brainer putting this guy at least 2. And he's got another layer of battle protection. What else could you want? Then we've got one of the BT9 WereGarurumon X. I didn't want to run 3 of the EX5 WereGaru X's, so I just went with 1 of these because I really like Evoing for free over my wares, and the fact that it bounces a level 4 back to your opponent's hand is too good to pass up in the current meta. He helped a lot. He bounced a lot of Numamons to hand, he bounced Ukomons to hand, a lot of annoying things like that. He just got rid of them. And then we're running 2 of the EX5 WereGarurumon X's. This card is crazy. It evos for 1 on top of your WereGarurumon, but we can counteract that with Protoform, and we can also counteract that in a few different ways, such as having Mat on the board. This card does add a card back to your hand from your trash, so you are adding cards to your hand from your trash, which will proc your Mat, and you get to restand, possibly swing again, or you could go into a Mega right away and then use his inheritable effect if you can keep turn to stand your Mega back up. Like, there's a bunch of different play routes that you could go using this card. I would not run it at less than 2. It's too good. Alright, moving on to our level 6s, our Megas. We're running 3 copies of the BT15 Warp Melga. This card is the MVP of this deck. I would not run it at less than 3. It allowed me to win so many matches. This card confused so many people whenever it came out. A couple people even asked to read it because they had never played against it before, and a few people, as soon as they saw it, you could like see the sadness in their eyes. You could see the depression set into their faces whenever this card hit the board because they didn't have an out to it. The fact that this thing can stun Tamers is absolutely busted. Absolutely busted. If you're playing against Red Hybrid, boom, your Takuyas are stunned for the turn. And I have a body with evade on it, so if you like Emperor or something like that, it's not going to be affected, bro. It's just going to dodge and stand back up, and then evade again if you have another out. There's like 3 Louis on the board, boom, they can't suspend and give you memory next time you push out. Like, this card is insane. My one loss was against Leviamon in this tournament, and this card kept me in the game against Leviamon. I got incredibly unlucky in the security checks, still busted, still crazy. This card is absolutely insane. Run it at 3, you won't regret it. Up next, we've got my little tech for this deck. We're running one copy of the EX1 Melga. This guy, you can go into this guy for like free, like most of the time. I want to say the amount of times I went into this Melga for 0 to 1 memory was upwards of like 65%, at least. More than half of the time I evoed into this guy, I had so many cards in my hand, I was evoing into him for like 1 or for free. It's crazy. And he has a when attacking effect that if you have a Tamer and 8 or more cards in hand, whenever he attacks, he can bottom deck any of your opponent's Digimon that have an on deletion effect. And a lot of people were caught off guard by this. Red Hybrid was caught off guard by this. Numamon was caught off guard by this. And just so many people did not realize it bottom decked an on deletion Digimon. It helped out a ton. And if worse comes to worse, you're evoing for pretty cheap on a Melga. You're swinging, you're not bottom decking anything because they don't have anything out, but you also only paid like 1 memory to go into this guy. So you get to go into Melga X for 1, stand back up, keep turn, go into an Omnimon, swing again, maybe Omni Blitz after that swing in the game. It's so good. You have to run this card. Then of course we've got 2 copies of the BT9 Melga X. This guy's crazy, he always goes hard. He bounced a lot of stuff to hand. There was one time where I bounced 2 Ukomons and a Chumon back to my opponent's hand because I went into him, and I bounced a lot of Red Hybrid stuff to hand. I bounced a lot of Leviamon stuff back to hand. This card just goes hard, and it always will. It'll probably always be a staple in Melga because that new Melga X from EX5 is not cutting it. This guy's still the GOAT. Alright, our level 7, starting us off, we've got 1 copy of Blitz Omni. You already know what it does, Omni for game. And then we're also running 1 copy of Omnimon Merciful Mode. This guy won me more than a couple of games. Passing turn with this guy, no matter how much memory you're giving Red Hybrid, as long as you're stunning all their Tamers with your BT15 Melga, and then you go into this guy. After that, you bottom deck all of their Red Hybrid pieces from the trash, and they kind of just sit there and they're like, well, this sucks. An incredible card. I would not consider running any other level 7 in its place right now. It's especially good in the meta right now. Sick Omnimon. Alright, moving on to our Tamers. We're running 4 copies of The Boy. We're running 4 Matt Ishidas. This card, these are the wheels that let you run down the road in this deck. I want Matt on the board as soon as possible. Does that mean I should be running things like EX1 Garurumon or EX1 Gabumon? Not necessarily. I feel like I draw too many cards in this deck to warrant any of those other cards. I feel like I see him pretty early enough to justify not running any of those cards. I feel like I had so many matches where I saw him when I needed him and not a moment sooner or later, and I just like the way the current deck feels whenever I play it. I feel like I don't need to run anything to get my mats out faster. Up next, we're playing 1 copy of the Davis Motomiya. He's just a memory setter. He can search top 3 cards and add 1 blue Digimon card to your hand. He didn't come up too many times in my matches, except for one time when I was playing against the Wargreymon player and the yellow vaccine/yellow hybrid player. Basically, they were trying to choke me, and in the rounds after that, I was like, well, I'm not going to get choked again, so I'm just going to drop this Davis out pretty early, and they just had to keep making unoptimized plays against him, and it ended up working out pretty well. I honestly thought about cutting him and going for a Analog U just to reset my hatching phase when my level 5 dies, but I don't know. Davis worked out pretty well. Alright, up next we've got options. I'm running 4 copies of the blue mental training. This card is great. I would not run it at less than 4. It feels almost mandatory in this deck. It searches your mats, and it also lets you go into things like your rare Garurumons without passing turn. And honestly, it's really sick when you drop the Gabumon for 3 when they have a level 6 on their side, and you just pop one of these and then evo into your BT15 Warp Melga and keep turn. Like, it's insane. It allows for so many good plays like that. Then we're also running 2 of the X-Antibody Protoform from EX5. This card is actually crazy in this deck. This card was a little bit slept on my part. I didn't think it was that good in this deck because in my mind Melga is swing, 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 swing. I want the one attacking effect of the old X antibody, but the fact that you could use Protoform and then go into your EX5 WereGarurumon for free a lot of the times helped set up some crazy combos, and that free Evo on your WereGaru X was just crazy. And not to mention it let you go into things like Melga X for a reduced cost sometimes when you had to pay the full cost, so you could go into your Melga X for 3 under a WereGaru stack, or you could go into your Melga X for free if you were in a Melga stack, and it was just crazy. And not to mention the fact that you just like recover off of it. You know, if your stack is getting attempted to get deleted, that's the other thing that was really sick, is that you can trigger the Protoform even before you trigger your battle protection. So you could recover, trigger Protoform, add something back to your hand, and then battle protect. And that was perfectly fine. And that helped so many times. There were so many grindy matchups where I just needed to stall out a little bit, and this card was great. Wouldn't run it at less than 2. And the final card in the deck is an option. It's Great Maelstrom. I actually put this card in the deck because of one of my buddies at Locals. Shout out to Harrison. He ran it in his Ulforce deck, and it absolutely destroyed me when I saw him play this. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that was a card. I'm not gonna lie. So I put this in my deck just to deal with stuff in case I went up against Fanglongmon, because I need some way to out Fanglongmon. I didn't have any good answers for it in this deck until this card. Stuff like removing aces, stacks with aces in them, and stuff like that. I was expecting to run into like some Mega Gargomon stuff, and I was like, man, I don't really have a great way to deal with that stuff, so maybe a one of like spot removal is pretty good. I cast it for 6 most of the time because of the effect. In case you don't know, when you would use this card from your hand by placing one of your blue Digimon as the bottom Digivolution card of one of your other blue Digimon, you reduce the cost by 3. So effectively you get to play this for 3 if you have another body on the board, if you have 2 bodies on the board. And the main effect is you get to return one of your opponent's Digimon to the bottom of their deck. I didn't want to send things like aces back to my opponent's hand, so I figured having the option to bottom deck something would be more helpful in certain situations, and it worked out well. It even got hit in security a couple times, which was pretty sick. And yeah, that's the deck profile. Now I'm going to talk about my matchups and the overall experience of the tournament. My first matchup was against Mirage Galgamon, and I'm not going to lie, I thought this would be a terrible matchup for me just because of the sheer amount of cards that I draw in this deck, but it was actually back and forth because we're both kind of similar in terms of speed. He was a really great player, really smart, really adaptable to what I was doing. He knew how Melga played, and I knew how Mirage played, so we were kind of bouncing off of each other's knowledge of the game. Really good player. I believe his name was Chris. He was an extremely good player. My second matchup was my only loss for the entire day. It was Leviamon. I knew it was an extremely tough matchup for me, especially because I play the deck and I know how it works and I know its strengths and weaknesses. And with Melga, you kind of just got to pray when you swing that you're not going to hit things like Biting Crush or 7th Lightning. You got to plan when you're expecting a 7th Lightning in security as opposed to a Biting Crush because they hit different things. And it's honestly just kind of a headache. There were times where they passed me the full 8 memory because they Biting Crushed something, and it's kind of hard to come back from if you don't have something in the raising. So it was kind of a mind game of, do I promote and start swinging, or do I keep building up? And you're on a clock, obviously, because you're playing against Leviamon. They misplayed many times. I had to explain a lot of their deck to them, even though they had a general understanding of what they were doing. I don't know, it's just one of those bad matchups, I guess. My third match for the day was against WarGreymon. It was just red WarGreymon, nothing crazy. It ran WarGreymon X and the Raid WarGreymon on top of the Warp WarGreymon from BT15, I believe. And he was a good player. He knew how to play WarGreymon. However, he did not understand at the beginning that this Melga stopped you from suspending, so turning sideways essentially. He thought it was an unsuspend freeze, like his Digimon couldn't unsuspend, and I had to explain to him that's not how that worked, and he just couldn't swing, basically. And once he figured that out, he tried to circumvent it by using HOWDY Spores, which tried to blow up the Melga stack, which I would just evade and dodge, and he was like, okay, but I get to attack now, right? And I was like, no, you can't turn sideways still. So things like that ended up helping me take that matchup. And also the WereGarurumon Ace, I ended up just hard slamming it one turn to continuously stun my opponent's War Greymon stack. He just couldn't out it effectively, and after that I just swung for game after he passed turn. My fourth matchup was against Red Hybrid, which was like exactly what I wanted to see in this tournament. This deck eats Red Hybrid's lunch, dude. Like, easy. I was like, hell yes, Red Hybrid finally. He ended up taking one match off of me just because of like the sheer amount of Ukomons that he had on the board, and I didn't have my mat. I couldn't find him in time, so my Sagittarius mode couldn't bounce his Ukomons back to hand fast enough. But I held out for a pretty good long while, but he just ended up taking it that first round. Game 2 and 3, I just stunned everything on his board. I never let him get any value off of anything staying on the board. It was constantly being bounced to hand, and I also merciful moded him and just passed turn where he couldn't use any of his Takuyas because they were stunned, and he had no graveyard, and I believe he was at like 2 memory or something, so he just had 0 plays. It was beautiful. My fifth matchup of the day was against Numamon. He was a great Numamon player. He knew all of his effects. However, he was not expecting the EX1 Melga. I used EX1 Melga specifically a couple of times to bottom deck things like his Manzemon X, which had the, I believe it was the Numamon X inheritable on deletion effect. I believe, I could be wrong, but it was something like that. And he was wondering, like, you know, does an inheritable effect count as the Digimon having an on deletion effect? And I was like, yeah, it's still part of the Digimon stack, man. It does count. And Melga EX1 just helped so much in that matchup. I was so justified in running the EX1 Melga. It felt great. I was so happy that that card in particular ended up working out, because I was really unsure on it at first. I thought I wanted to run the Ace Melga, the purple one from the structure deck, and I was like, nah, it doesn't really feel like the right move this tournament. And I'm glad I went with the X1 Melga. It was great. Good opponent. I noticed that he wasn't running any Heaven's Judgment, which is really bad into this deck, like, or for this deck to play against. Like, Heaven's Judgment is this deck's bane. If you go against a deck that runs Heaven's Judgment, you're probably going to lose if they use it effectively, because this card can't deal with it at all. My sixth match of the day was another Red Hybrid player. He was definitely better than the other Red Hybrid player I played against. He definitely knew his plays better, he knew his cards better. However, he made a misplay against me after I went into this Melga. I stunned 3 of his Takuyas, and he didn't have anything in raising. So he ended up evoing on top of one of his Takuyas, and he ended up like evoing again for 1, and then I was like, oh man, he's cooking. He's about to do something like crazy that I'm not expecting. And then he used Atomic Inferno, and I was like, wait a minute, did he forget that he's stunned and he can't attack, even though I made it like pretty clear? And then he went to turn sideways, and I was like, you can't, you're stunned still from the Melga effect, remember? And he was like, ah, shit. So I think he just forgot, but that's just one of the strengths of this deck. It's so good against Red Hybrid. That's why I wanted to take it to this regional, because I know people love playing Red Hybrid, and I hate that deck. And then my final match for the day, it was against a unique list that I have never played against before. It was a yellow deck that ran hybrids, and it also ran Marcus and the like Shine Greymon Agumons, but it also ran things like Venusmon and Magna Angemon and Lonki Adestacto and Heaven's Judgment and a bunch of other crazy cards like that. So I was like, is it like yellow hybrid, yellow like vaccine, like Setcon? It was like a mishmash of all 3 of those things. But he was a great player, very kind, very friendly. He was actually the one of the co-hosts of a YouTube show called DigiNerds. His name is Inferno. Really nice guy. I've actually watched their content more than a few times. They're pretty chill dudes. But he put up such a good fight, man. There was one turn where he like double Venus Demond and like stunned me out of like doing anything effectively for like 2 entire turns. That was really rough. We were both at 1-1, so he had won a match and then I'd won a match, and then it was like final round and we ended up going into time. Very close game. I had a body in the back and a body on the board, and his last security was like a Heaven's Judgment, so he would have been able to get rid of like one body, but I think I could have like gone up the line enough to like take out that last security and swing for game. But it was really close. It was like an excellent set, so like shout out to Inferno. That was a great match. So yeah, my final score for the day at regionals was 5 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. That ended up netting me at 17th place, 1 place short of top 16, which kind of bums me out, but you know, it happens. I was like, man, if the Leviamon player could have like actually kept winning, the one that beat me throughout the day, I might have bubbled up in the top 16, but they just ended up losing like game after game after game after they beat me, and I was like, man, that sucks. But it was still so much fun. Top 17 out of a like 256 player event is definitely the highest I've ever placed in anything, so I was really stoked. All my friends were really stoked. Shout out to the people at Clockwork Games and College Station. Like, man, it's so much fun going to play cards with those guys. I love them to death. Couldn't ask for a better card game crew. But yeah, guys, this has been the deck profile of the deck that I took to regionals in Mesquite, Texas. If you like the video, give it a like. If you like the content, maybe consider subscribing. You know, like, I don't know. I'm just making this content for myself, honestly, but I'm also just trying to help out my fellow Melga players because we gotta stick together, bro. We got a wolf pack, you know? Anyway, thanks, guys. Have a good one.